Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hallie Roderick, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. If you're a mom or a daughter and you've ever felt that quiet desire for deeper connection between you, but you don't want it to feel forced or uncomfortable, I want to invite you into something really special. It's called Becoming Together, a mother-daughter retreat in Sedona, Arizona, happening September 8th through the 12th, that I'm hosting alongside my own daughters. This experience is really close to our hearts because we understand that every mother-daughter relationship is unique and it's not always perfect. And this isn't about fixing anything. It's about creating a space to soften, to breathe, and to connect in your own way. Over a few beautiful days in Sedona, we'll guide you through experiences like breathwork, sound baths, mindful movement, even a vortex hike, and of course, nourishing meals. Each of us bringing our own gifts to support you, while also honoring your individual journey. There's no pressure to open up before you're ready, no expectation to be anything other than yourself, just a safe, supportive space to reconnect with yourself, with each other, and with something greater. If you feel even the smallest pull, you can find more information in the show notes, because you don't have to have a perfect relationship to begin becoming together. Thank you so much for being here with me today on Rooted and Rising Healing. If a boundary feels wrong, does that mean that it's wrong? I would suggest no. It actually might mean that it's new. If you've ever said something brave, set a limit, asked for what you needed, or told someone what you would or wouldn't accept, and then felt this immediate wave of dread or guilt like you've done something wrong, then this episode is for you. That feeling has a name. It's called new. And new and wrong can feel identical in your body. Today, we're going to learn how to tell them apart. If you think about it, your body's always been tracking your yes and your no. But betrayal trauma teaches us to override it because your body's been setting boundaries long before you even had the language for it. Think about when you get a tight chest, or your stomach drops, or your shoulders are tightened, or your breath changes. That is your nervous system speaking. And the problem isn't that you don't know your no. The problem is that somewhere along the way, you learned that honoring your no wasn't safe. So I want you to think about just maybe if you're not driving, if you're somewhere where you can close your eyes for a second, and just think of something purely good, something just pure goodness, pure joy. Could be a person, a place, a moment with no complications. Where do you feel that in your body? Is there a texture or a quality or a sensation or a color? What is that? And that is your yes. Okay? So hold on to that, absorb that, store that in your body so you can remember this is what my yes feels like. Now think of something small that simply right now is not good for you. Doesn't have to be anything big, just a minor, that's not for me. Where does that land? Is there tightness, heaviness? Is there a shift in your breathing? If so, that's your no. And one of the things that betrayal does is, in a sense, it gaslights you out of your own body's knowing, because you likely felt that something was wrong, but somebody else was telling you that you were wrong. So over time, you learn to mistrust your own internal signals because your partner was telling you that they were wrong. In the middle of deception, misrepresentation, gaslighting, when betrayal is happening, that's typically what's going on, is they're telling you that you're wrong, even though your body is sensing something. Even though you may not have the cognitive awareness of what's wrong, your body is sensing it. So part of our own recovery work includes reclaiming that signal. And it starts with noticing, not even acting on it yet, just noticing, what is my body saying right now? I just came off the latest women's somatic intensive, and we spent the whole week practicing what's my yes and what's my no, giving permission to say yes, giving permission to say no, and really tuning in to what our body is saying. So the goal isn't always to obey the sensation that's happening. The goal is actually to stop being afraid of it, to sit in the sensation while we get more clarity on it. We can intellectually agree with a right or a value that we have and still not believe it in our bones, especially after betrayal. So there's a difference between knowing that you have a right to something and feeling like you have a right to something. And that could be knowing what your values are and feeling like you have the right to honor them, to respect them, to live in line with them. And so for women in betrayal trauma recovery, sometimes the gap between those two can feel enormous. So let's just think about a few rights that can sometimes be the hardest to claim. And if you've been listening to me for a while, you know I love rights and values, and they go along with boundaries. But here's a few that can sometimes really feel hard to claim. One is that I have a right to say no without justifying it. I can just say no. I don't need to justify or argue, defend, or explain it. I can just say no. But sometimes that can feel really uncomfortable. I also have the right to accurate information in my life. That can feel uncomfortable to ask for that or to insist on being in a relationship where you have that. You have a right to feel what you feel, even if it's inconvenient for others. So sometimes if somebody is uncomfortable with our emotions or our feelings, we might question whether we have a right to that. And we do have a right to feel what we feel. You have a right to withdraw access to your time, to your body, to your energy. And sometimes saying, no, I won't participate in that, or no, I can't do that, or no, I won't be there is uncomfortable, especially if we're kind, which most of us are. We like to do things that are supportive of others, but sometimes we do that at the sacrifice of ourselves. You have a right to protect your healing, even if others don't understand it. So you have a right to get support, to attend groups, to go to intensives, to take time for yourself, to meditate, to journal, to read, to listen to podcasts. You have a right to do all of that, even if somebody else doesn't understand it. So sometimes we get this but moment. So have you ever said anything and then immediately added a but? Like, no, I can't do that, but I will do this instead. The but, in a sense, is a permission slip. It's asking for your approval that you don't actually need. So why do we do this? A lot of times it's because many of us grew up or spent years in dynamics where love was conditional in a sense, where being agreeable was how we stayed safe. Saying no without justification might have felt like a risk. So I want you to pick one from that list that I just shared a minute ago or one of your own, and I want you to say it out loud just to yourself and notice what your body does. So I'm talking about the rights that you have. Say that right out loud. Notice what your body says. Notice if you tend to add the but. That impulse is the thing we're working on, okay? That impulse of the but. You don't actually need anybody else's vote to have a right. You just need to stop waiting for anybody else's approval and just claim that right. Now, along with rights are values. Boundaries are rooted in values, and our values don't need to meet anybody else's agreement. That's what makes them hold. Being clear on what we value. When something that we value is being violated, then we know we need a boundary. And a boundary is not a rule that you enforce on somebody else. It's a value statement you embody for yourself. So if we think about boundaries, we can think of observing. So when a specific behavior is happening, and this isn't like a character attack, but a specific act or behavior. When I observe a specific behavior happening, then I will feel in my body what it brings up. Not, I feel like you're doing this, but an actual felt sense in my own body. So when I observe this, what do I feel? That's the first. Observe, feel, and then protect. And protect is what you will do in response, not what you're expecting or wanting or needing someone else to do or telling them what they must do, but what will you do? So observe, feel, protect. For example, when I ask to see your phone and you hesitate or get defensive, I notice my body goes cold and I lose my footing. Now here's the act. I will be taking that response as information I need to factor into my own decisions about this relationship. Okay? Notice I'm not saying anything about what the other person needs to do. I'm just noticing that when I ask to see your phone and you hesitate or get defensive, then I'm noticing, I'm feeling in my body that it goes cold and I lose my footing. Now the protect. So I'll be taking that response as information that I need to factor into my own decisions about how I'm going to engage in this relationship. Okay, so see why values matter. When you're clear on what you're protecting, and you might label this in this example as maybe different things. First thing that comes to my mind is like transparency, safety, honesty, knowing the facts of my reality. That's what you're protecting. You stop needing the other person to agree with you. You stop needing, in a sense, to be the winner. And you just stand firm in that value and in what you will do to protect. Okay? So I want you to think about your own core values. Maybe one that you can identify has been violated recently. One that if it were consistently violated, that you would know deep down that something is wrong. Is it safety? Is it honesty? Is it dignity? Is it authenticity? That core value is the thing your boundary is protecting. So when you can name it, the boundary stops being the fight and it starts being about your ground that you're holding, okay? You don't need the other person to understand your boundary. Only you need to know what you're protecting. So sometimes clients will come to me and they go, okay, I wrote out my boundaries and now I'm going to give them to him. He doesn't need your boundaries. You need your boundaries. You need your boundaries. You need to know what your boundaries are, and then you act accordingly. And he will learn your boundaries based on how you behave and how you respond. So sometimes I think that when we give the boundaries, like we give a list of boundaries, it puts us in this unhealthy dynamic of power and control or parent-child, student-teacher role where here's my rules I need you to follow. And if you don't, then you're going to be in trouble. But I don't want to be in that dynamic in my marriage. I don't want to be in that. I just want to live aligned with my values, know what my rights and my values are, and then I can respond accordingly to everybody in my world, not just in my marriage. So now what I want to talk about with this is new things are probably going to feel wrong before they feel right. Let me say that again. When you're doing something new, new things are probably going to feel wrong before they start to feel right. So just sit with that for a minute. Okay? Here is what a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to boundary work, that doing something new is going to feel uncomfortable. And not just a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes this deeply visceral uncomfortableness inside of us. And when that discomfort arrives, our brains, especially our nervous systems, which have been shaped by trauma, interpret this discomfort as danger, and the alarm goes off. And we think, well, maybe this boundary is wrong, or maybe I'm too much, or maybe I should soften it. But the discomfort is not the same as wrong. This might be unfamiliar, but unfamiliar is not the same as dangerous, okay? So think about other things that felt deeply uncomfortable before they came normal, okay? Like maybe the first time you had a hard conversation. The first time you asked for what you needed without apologizing for it. The first time you left a situation that wasn't safe for you. None of those were wrong. They were just new. And our nervous system responds to something unfamiliar, something new. And our nervous systems calibrate themselves to whatever we have survived. So if you survived being agreeable by not rocking the boat, by going along to getting along, by making yourself small, then standing up is going to feel like a threat. Because in the old environment, it might have been one. But you're not in the old environment anymore. You're creating your own safety. Your safety's starting to come from within. But your nervous system just hasn't caught up yet. This is the practice of boundaries. Sitting in the discomfort is part of that recalibration. It's not a sign that you failed, and it's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's actually evidence that you're doing something that matters. So instead of asking yourself, does this feel right? Because it probably won't, not yet. Ask yourself, what value am I protecting right now? What right am I protecting right now? And let those values and the rights be the compass. That's what we measure it by. Am I guarding something that I value or that I have a right to? And then eventually, as you do that more consistently and you keep practicing that, your comfort's going to catch up. But only if you let the discomfort do its work first. So you have to be willing to sit through the discomfort to get to where it becomes more of a normal, comfortable situation. So normalize the voice shaking. Normalize the urge to apologize. Just notice them and speak and hold the boundary anyway. You don't actually have to feel steady to hold steady. You just have to stay with it a little longer than you want to or than you're used to. And this can lead to this exhaustion that often comes not only from your own healing, but trying to manage somebody else's. So I want to think about what's yours to hold and what's not yours to hold. One of the most draining things in betrayal trauma is the energy spent on the outer circle, what he does, what he thinks, whether he changes, how he responds to your boundary, or whether he even truly understands. None of that is actually yours. And yet, for many of us, it has become a second job. So if you want to, you can do this little exercise where you create 2 columns, get a piece of paper out, draw a line down the middle, create 2 columns. On one side, you write down what's mine to hold. And in that column could be things like your feelings, your choices, your healing, your responses, your body, your voice, your value, your rights. Just a few examples. In the other column, you write theirs to hold. And that could include things like his choices, his healing timeline, his response to your boundaries, whether or not he changes. When the columns start to bleed into each other, when you start to find yourself living in his column, you'll know you're spending the energy that actually belongs to you on something you can't control. And that is where the exhaustion lives. I talked about this a lot last week in the episode on caring versus controlling. And so if you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to that one. Because you can love somebody really deeply and still put down the work of managing their process and their recovery. In fact, releasing it is actually a form of respect. It acknowledges that, hey, you are a full, capable adult and you are capable of managing your own emotions, your own recovery, your own choices. So you don't have to stop caring about somebody to stop carrying them. Do you see that play on words? You don't have to stop caring about them to stop carrying them, like picking him up and dragging him along or pulling him or holding the extra weight of what is his. You don't have to carry that, but you can still be caring without carrying his stuff. So all of your power lives in what is actually yours, your nervous system, your choices, your healing, your voice. And that is not a small thing. That is everything. So I want to encourage you. I want to just give you some things to maybe practice. Boundaries are a practice. Recovery, a lot of recovery is a practice. So maybe just a couple things to think about. Do a daily body check-in. Once a day, pause and say, okay, right now, is my body in yes or is my body in no? Don't fix it. Just notice it and name it. You can do this with little things that have nothing to do with recovery. Like, okay, if I'm going to eat this, is my body saying yes or is my body saying no? Do I want to take a shower or a bath? What's my yes? What's my no? Do I want to answer that phone call? Do I want to let it go to voicemail? What's my yes? What's my no? Okay, little things. And then practice. Maybe if boundaries are hard, start with just one little micro boundary. Choose something small and real this week. Before you act, check with your body. And after that, notice what happened. And this data is in the sensation, not in the outcome. So we're noticing the sensation in your body, the physiological response, not the outcome. Okay? And then when the discomfort comes around the boundary, instead of asking yourself, is this right? Ask yourself, What am I protecting? Am I protecting a right or a value? And let that be the answer, not the fear. Okay? Hopefully those are helpful, just daily practices. So I would encourage you and love for you to just own the truth that I am allowed to hold this boundary, even if it feels uncomfortable. I'm allowed to hold a boundary, even if it makes somebody else uncomfortable. The value I am protecting is mine. The ground I'm standing on is mine. And I'm just reminding you that a boundary is not a wall that you build to keep love out. It's actually the ground you stand on so you can offer love without losing yourself in the process. And learning to stand on that ground takes practice, and it takes sitting in the discomfort. It takes saying the hard thing even when your voice shakes. And that is not a flaw in your process. That actually is the process. So if you're finding boundaries to be uncomfortable, remember that it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just might mean that it's new. And if you have found some value in this episode today, I would love it if you would share it with somebody else that you know that might benefit from it. And also leave me a review, rate my show. That really helps me grow my audience and helps others that need this podcast to be able to find it. I hope that you'll be here with me again next week. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination. It's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.